To call Payday 2 a success would be an understatement. Since its release in 2013, it's managed to push a combined total of over 9 million copies, has done successful crossovers with games like Hotline Miami and films like Hardcore Henry, John Wick, and Point Break, and in general has been a staple part of multiplayer Steam games for years. However, I'd be lying if I said things weren't a bit different now than they were before. A few years ago, you'd regularly see Payday 2 appear alongside things like Team Fortress 2, CSGO, and Killing Floor as people's favorite games to play on Steam, but nowadays its developers Overkill and Starbreeze are barely clinging to life, making desperate bids to appease shareholders, and pushing out half-baked DLC for the game in an effort to keep themselves afloat. You may think that this kind of situation is new for the game, but sadly it's really not. Despite its roarous financial success, Payday 2 is a game that's no stranger to controversies and messy behind-the-scenes struggles. In fact, I'd say that this game might have one of the dirtiest histories out of any game that's ever called itself a success. As someone who's been playing the game since 2014, in this video I'll be talking about some of them. This is the troubled history of Payday 2. Before we begin, I'd like to say that talking about every single controversy that Payday 2's ever been involved in is not an undertaking that I'm capable of. There's just been too many, and way too many of them have a lot of smoke around them. For this video, I'll be primarily focusing on things that have affected the PC Steam version of the game, as that's the most popular and well-known. We will deviate from this a bit at the end of the video, but for the most part, this is a PC discussion. However, some honorable mentions for this video of things that have happened to Payday include the console versions of the game being abandoned, the hosting of two separate entire conventions based around the game and the cancellation of a third, and the parent company of Overkill, Starbreeze, being raided by police on accounts of insider trading. These are obviously things that happened, but I feel that focusing on more substantial and internalized problems of the game's history would be more appropriate for a video like this. I want to begin this video with an aspect of the game that proved frustrating and confusing for many players for basically the entire first half of the game's lifespan, its DLC. If you want to buy and play Payday 2 this year, you're in luck, because you can just pick up the Legacy Collection, a pack containing all of the game's original DLC under one convenient price. This means that you only actually have to buy a small fraction of additional DLC in order to complete the game. However, prior to mid-2017, this wasn't the case. Before this point, all of Payday's original DLC packs were released individually. For reference, the combined price of all of these DLCs at the time totaled in the hundreds of dollars. This meant that players who weren't able to purchase all of the packs would have to selectively pick and choose what ones they wanted and could afford. In addition, the way these packs were segmented proved very inconvenient. Let's say you just picked up the game and wanted to use the flamethrower as your primary weapon, the katana as your melee weapon, and play as the heister Clover. For this, you'd have to buy all three packs containing all three of these parts of the game individually. This made actually buying and getting into Payday 2 a very daunting and confusing process for new players, and I can imagine plenty of people didn't buy the game for this exact reason. Plus, the Legacy Collection wasn't even Payday 2's initial means of fixing the DLC problem. In June 2017, Payday 2 was changed into Payday 2 Ultimate Edition, a $45 bundle containing the game and all DLC up to that point, with all of the previous DLC being made unpurchasable as it was included in the bundle. This was a massively streamlined way of purchasing the game and was much appreciated. However, if you were a player who had already doled out money for the individual DLCs before this, how were you compensated? Well, you had money taken off of the total of the Ultimate Edition if you were to purchase, and that was it. This proved frustrating for a lot of longtime players who had paid for fractions of the DLC in the past. However, with this came the promise of no more paid DLC in the future, with all future content being free. As we all know, sadly, this wouldn't turn out to be the case in the end. In very late 2018, Payday 2 released the White House Heist, as a part of a free update that was meant to serve as the final major patch for the game. All future content was to be simple bug fixes and polishing, with full development of the game having been officially stopped. That said, things don't always turn out the way we planned them. After the disastrous release of Overkill's The Walking Dead, which left the companies Overkill and Starbreeze fractured in financial ruin and in need of restructuring, Payday 2 was revived with the hopes that its popularity would save the companies. Along with this, the Ultimate Edition was reverted to the Legacy Collection, and all previous DLC was once again made available for purchase at a cheaper price than their initial releases. Soon after, in November of 2019, the Border Crossing Heist was released, being the game's first official DLC since resuming development. In addition, the Cartel Optics Pack and Taylor Pack DLCs were also released, adding weapon and character customization respectively. The Heist specifically was criticized by fans for seeming rushed and plain, resembling a fan map more than an official content pack. This was, of course, indicative of Overkill's financial state, but still left many players unsatisfied and frustrated with the game's decision to resume paid DLC development. However, this would not be the first time that Overkill had broken a financially fueled promise to their fans, but it could be seen as certainly less predatory than the first attempt. As a part of Crime Fest 2015, a yearly community-focused event that served to add new content to the game, Payday 2 introduced safes and drills to its drop lineup. These were effectively cases and keys, equivalent to something like Counter-Strike or Team Fortress 2's models. After paying $250 for a drill, you could open one of your safes for a chance to win a weapon skin, and rather controversially, a weapon skin with stat boosts that gave you an advantage over other players who didn't have them. To say that this decision angered fans is an understatement. This was easily the biggest controversy that Payday 2 had ever been involved with, and saw many major gaming news outlets headlining their stories with it. Part of what made it so controversial to fans was not only the addition of effective pay-to-win elements, but also the fact that it directly contradicted previous claims made by higher-ups at Overkill, who had stated in 2013 that the game would never feature microtransactions. This resulted in not only mountains of horrible PR for the game, but also mass review bombing of it on Steam, the remnants of which can still be seen today. Again, this was without a doubt the biggest public controversy that Payday 2 had ever been involved with, and it was only after intense backlash from both fans and the general public and the acquisition of Payday 2 by Starbreeze in mid-2016 that the microtransactions were removed. The effects of this decision still linger today, and it became a permanent stain on what was otherwise a pretty clean game up to this point. In the same year that controversy happened, Overkill was also experiencing major behind-the-scenes changes. For unstated reasons, Ulf Andersson, one of the initial founders of Overkill and chief director of Payday 2, left the company. He had apparently not shown up to work for months at that point and officially announced his leave in mid-2015. This proved problematic for several reasons, not the least of which being that Ulf was the voice and face model for Wolf, one of Payday 2's original 4 main heisters. This means that, from this point on, Wolf would never obtain new voice clips or significant portrayals in any Payday media. This didn't stop Overkill, however, from releasing the Wolf Pack in early 2016, a DLC pack themed entirely around the character. This decision felt to many fans tone-deaf and ill-informed, considering that the character who the pack was themed around couldn't actually feature in it in any meaningful way. While this pack was a remake of a similar pack from the first game, the decision was still criticized by fans. Ulf Andersson would later go on to spearhead development of GTFO. There's a lot more that we could discuss, but I think I'm going to cut things here. As one last thing to discuss for this video, let's briefly switch focus from the PC version of the game to consoles. Payday 2 obviously has history on them, be it through multiple confusing releases or being completely abandoned. For this section, I want to specifically focus on the most troubled version of the game, the Nintendo Switch version. Released in February of 2018, this version of Payday 2 was notable for being a slapdash and poorly optimized port, running poorly on the console and lacking a lot of up-to-date content. At release, the most recent content pack available in the Switch version was the Most Wanted update, which was released several months prior to this version of the game. It received very few updates during its time available and was officially shut down in December of 2019, just under 2 years after launch. Not only that, but the original heister made for this version of the game, Joy, a character whose name and design were literally created in reference to the Switch as a console, was added to the PC version in a later update, completely removing all incentive to play this version of the game. This was a similar situation to what happened to the Xbox 360 and PS3 versions of the game, and is a general sign of how overly ambitious Overkill could tend to be with the IP. I think that term sums up Payday 2's rocky history the best: overly ambitious. There seemed to be this general sentiment among the developers for a while that the game was bigger than it was. And yes, while it certainly was and still is a big game, it was never big enough to get away with the kind of things they attempted to pull with it. Adding microtransactions, ceasing development only to restart it, releasing versions across multiple SKUs, and holding entire events are the things that games and franchises significantly bigger than Payday tend to struggle with, so it's no surprise that not a lot of these gambles paid off in the end. With Overkill and Starbreeze on their last legs, with them announcing Payday 3 and releasing new DLC in a desperate bid to appease shareholders and generate profit, it can be hard to look at Payday's past mistakes and not see them as symptomatic of larger problems with the companies. I love Payday 2, and I wish the best for both developers, which is why I feel that it's important to remember stuff like this. Not to shame them, but to learn how they can improve. Thanks for watching.